Hey there, welcome back to the NerdNest. I'm Bill, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Anbernic RG Cube. I have to say, of all of the retro handhelds I have, this one I feel like is going to be very divisive. Not because it's bad, but because I feel like the different features of the RG Cube that they kind of crammed into this thing, they're going to appeal to different people. So when some people look at it, they're going to say this is perfect for this and bad for that. And other people are going to think, well, no, it's perfect for that, but bad for this. And I think that both people could probably make an argument that would make a lot of sense. When I first saw it, my reaction was confusion. Anbernic clearly was thinking of more modern retro games when they designed this because they put the thumbstick above the D-pad. But then at the same time, they went with a 1:1 aspect ratio screen, which is traditionally better for older systems like Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. It feels like putting a bike handle on a car and a gas tank on an electric bike. It's just a really weird combination of things that Anbernic has squeezed into the RG Cube. This video is brought to you by Cook Unity. Cook Unity is the first ever chef-to-you delivery service. They bring restaurant quality meals straight to your table. Cook Unity is easy and effortless. You choose your plan and select meals from hundreds of options. If you aren't sure what you like, Cook Unity will choose some for you based on your preferences. The subscription is very flexible, from 4 to 16 meals each week, and you can skip weeks, pause, or cancel at any time. My current favorites are the grilled chicken and mushrooms from Tony Perez, the chicken tinka quesadilla from Ivy Stark, and JG's adobo chicken mac and cheese from Jose Garces. What I love about Cook Unity is how easy it makes dinner time. I simply heat and enjoy. There's no shopping, there's no prep, and cleanup is a breeze. Plus, if something is wrong with the service, they have excellent customer support team who will work with you to find the best solution for you. Enjoy restaurant quality meals for a fraction of the price. Subscriptions start as low as $11 per meal. So if you want to simplify mealtime, go to cookunity.com/nerdnest50 or click the link in the description and use my code NerdNest50 for 50% off your first order of Cook Unity meals to try them out for yourself. Let's talk about the buying options first. The RG Cube is priced at $170, but if you buy one now, you can get it for about $10 off, I think for 3 more days as I record this, and probably by the time you see it, it'll be for about 1 more day before that deal goes away. There's a few different colorways available. They have a gray one, which comes with the Famicom red buttons and D-pad. That's the one that Anbernic sent me. There's a black one with black buttons, a beige white one, which has blue, yellow, red, and green face buttons. And then there's the radiant purple one that comes with white buttons. All of them have RGB rings around the thumbsticks, so if anybody sees you using this, they'll have no doubt in their mind that you're a gamer, although you can easily turn these things off in settings if you like. I'm going to actually show you how to do that now. All you have to do is swipe down from the top, and then swipe over once, and then you have this ambient light right here. I'm going to tap on that, and I'm going to set it to gaming, and it turns it off. I don't know why gaming turns it off, but there you go. And now we're back into Daigisho. In the box, you'll get a screen protector as well as a USB A to C charging cable, and unlike the recent RG35XX SP, which I recently put out a video about, or the Miu Mini Plus, the RG Cube allows you to charge with whatever USB-C device you happen to have around, which is fantastic. Anbernic, please do, and not just Anbernic, everybody, please do this with all of your devices moving forward. Don't make me hold on to these old USB-A to C cables. Let's talk about the specs for this thing. The RG Cube comes with a 3.95-inch IPS screen with a resolution of 720p and an aspect ratio of 1:1. The CPU is the Unisoc T820 CPU with 8 cores. The GPU is a quad-core Mali G57 GPU running at 850 megahertz. It has 8 gigs of LPDDR4X RAM, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and it runs Android 13. It has an SD card reader that's compatible with up to 2 terabyte cards. I currently have a 256 gig card in it, and I'm not hurting for space. It has Hall effect joysticks and triggers, a gyroscope, active cooling, and you can hook it up to a TV and it will output 1080p through that USB-C port. Let's talk about the shell first. Anbernic made the RG Cube pretty thick thanks to the beefy handles on the side. I'm a big fan of the ergonomics on this. In fact, if you take a look at the back, you can see that we have a section right here on each grip that is textured in order to make it easier for you to hold on to. When I hold on to it, I'd say that my middle finger has a tendency to rest right against this texture. It feels good, and while I don't think I have to worry about dropping it anytime soon, I would have liked something that was just a little bit rougher, a little bit grippier, kind of like the feeling that the kill switch case has for the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally 1. My fingers rest on the triggers when I'm holding it, when they also have a texture to them. Walking around the outside of the device, on the top we have our triggers, and here, let me turn that off real quick. There we go. On the top we have our triggers and our bumpers. Here we have our USB-C port, our SD card port, and here is our headphone jack. Right below the SD card port is our output vent, so the active cooling has somewhere to send that hot air. On the back, we have the input for our cooling system, and you'll notice it's got a cute little cube shape to it, which I like. Then, on the right-hand side, we have our volume up and volume down buttons, as well as our power button. When I first saw it, I was worried that I was going to hit these by accident, but as you can see here in the video, they're recessed underneath that, and so you're not going to hit these by accident. At least that's not something that I've done yet. On the left-hand side, there's nothing there, so let's head over to the bottom. We have the ports for our dual bottom firing speakers. Let's actually fire up a game and hear how they sound real quick. It's really strange. Depending on what system you're emulating, it's going to depend on how loud the speakers get. So the TurboGrafx 16 gets incredibly loud, whereas the Sega Saturn's actually pretty quiet by comparison. Moving on to the controls, the D-pad is very reminiscent of a Sega Genesis or Sega Saturn. In fact, here you can see that I have it next to my 8BitDo M30 controller, and the D-pad, it basically looks like a small version of that. I have to say, I personally love Sega-style D-pad, so I'm a fan of this decision. It feels pretty good, though if you do the contra test that my friend Retro Game Core always does, you can see that I'm absolutely getting some accidental diagonal inputs, which seems like a bad thing, but I find it's very easy to actually hit my diagonals when I want to, and even though I'm failing the contra test here, when I'm actually playing, I don't feel like I'm getting bad inputs. I feel like I can hit the diagonals when I want to, and I tend not to hit them when I don't want to. Moving on to Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for the Dreamcast, I can easily throw fireballs, no problem, but I always seem to have trouble with dragon punches. Like, getting them to go off when I want is definitely an issue that I've run into, although I just did get 3 in a row without a problem. That being said, I think that if you're somebody who plays way more fighting games than I do, or, you know, is used to that style of input for a fighting game, I think that you're going to be okay with this because there's a lot of roll to that D-pad, and I like it a lot. The face buttons on this are really tall, they're rounded, and they're very different than the flat and clicky face buttons that are on the RG35XX SP. I think I like these buttons better. Overall, I think that both are good, but these ones are not nearly as clicky, and I feel like that they just feel better under my thumb. So I'm a fan of the buttons on this, and if I could swap them back and forth, I absolutely would. On the bottom left, you have 2 special buttons. The one on the right is the Android back button, and then the other one is a function key that will jump into Anbernic's default launcher pressure. I really don't like where these buttons are placed, as whenever I use the D-pad, it's pretty low, and I feel like sometimes I accidentally push not so much the back button, but I have pushed the function button more than once accidentally. On the right-hand side, we have our select and start buttons. Now, whenever I set up a retro system, I always like to set the select button as the modifier that lets me get to a bunch of different hotkeys, like save states, fast forward, you know, that kind of stuff. But with the select button being over on the right-hand side, it makes using all of those commands a little bit awkward because you're holding it down with your right-hand thumb and then also doing something else with another finger on the right hand. It's not a deal breaker, but if it were up to me, I would take and put the select button up here on the top left. I would put the start button up here on the top right, and then I would take the extra buttons that I talked about a little bit ago. I would take this button right here, and I would move it up here onto the top, or maybe on the left-hand side recessed in the same way that we have the volume button recessed like the other one. And then this extra button that launches Anbernic's default UI, I would just get rid of that altogether. There's no reason for me to need that when I have access to the Android back button. If they did that, it would give you more room on the front. You could put the speakers right here. Although when you're playing it, you might be covering up those speakers with your fingers or with your hands. So I'm not sure if putting the speakers on the front where you would cover them with your hands is actually a good idea. But I don't like the idea of a bottom firing speakers. I much prefer front firing speakers. Moving back up to the top where we have our bumpers and triggers. The bumpers are super clicky. Here, listen to this. They feel really good. And then right below those are our triggers. The triggers are textured, which I like a lot. It feels good, although I would have liked it to been just a little bit more rough. The games that I tend to play don't use the triggers, but this system can play more powerful systems. So having good triggers is important when you're playing more modern retro games. I feel like the triggers are very tight, which I appreciate. The end of the trigger is also extended a lot farther than I expected, which makes the trigger have a pretty long throw. Speaking of throw, let's talk about the joystick throw. These joysticks are very much like the Nintendo Switch sticks, which is great if you like the sticks on the Nintendo Switch. I personally don't. I think that they're pretty bad as far as joysticks go. What's worst is on the RG Cube, the sticks are recessed into the device, so I feel like the edge of the stick is hitting the case of the RG Cube when I hit them. But there's one difference between the RG Cube stick and the thumbsticks on the Nintendo Switch. The Switch sticks are potentiometer based, which means that they can wear out more easily over time. And the sticks on the RG Cube are Hall effect sticks. This means that they won't wear out nearly as fast as Nintendo Switch sticks. So I think that's a win. But the stick is above the D-pad. For my personal preference, I would have placed the thumbstick underneath the D-pad because I have a tendency to play older games more than newer games. But if you're playing GameCube games on this, then you're going to be happy that the stick is on the top. In the past few days, I've been playing my older cartridge-based games, but I've been setting the joystick as a D-pad, and for most games, it's just fine. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But is it good enough? Yeah, it really is. I'm not a competitive gamer, and even if I were, I certainly wouldn't be playing competitive games on the RG Cube anyway. Though I will say that sometimes the joystick is actually an improvement over a D-pad, especially in games like ice hockey for the NES. This is the kind of game that always gave me sore thumbs when I was playing, but playing ice hockey for the Nintendo Entertainment System on the RG Cube using the thumbstick as your D-pad is a fantastic experience. Well, it's as a fantastic experience as Nintendo Entertainment System ice hockey can be, especially as a one-player game because, you know, I'm not really playing two players on this. Let's talk about the screen for a second. The screen on this is a very strange choice. With the thumbstick being up at the top, you would think that this game or this system was designed around the idea that you're playing more modern games, which usually means wider screen games. This is a pretty weird screen to throw in here. It's a 720p by 720p display at a 1:1 aspect ratio. This means that almost everything that you play is either going to give you pillar boxes or letter boxes. But honestly, after using this, I think this is the right move for something like this. Game Boy games will look great at 4.5 times scaling. I know integer scaling is very important to some people, but for me, I really don't care about it nearly as much. I think that this looks fantastic. Game Boy Advance games will have integer scaling at 3x. The SNES and Nintendo Entertainment System will blow up theirs up to 2.8 times their native resolution, with the Super Nintendo having slightly more letterboxing than the Nintendo Entertainment System. Here you can see in RC Pro-Am that I'm using a preferred aspect ratio in RetroArch of uncorrected. That gives me little black bars on the top and bottom of the screen, but for some reason my whole screen is shifted to the right just a little bit, and I'm not sure what actually causes that to happen. I also have RetroArch running at uncorrected, and you can see that I've got black bars on the top and bottom, although I think that this looks absolutely fantastic. Some people might want to have like banners on the top and bottom to show off the Super Nintendo logo or something like that, but I think this looks great. The Genesis runs at a 2.3x resolution, and it'll have a little bit more letterboxing than the PlayStation. The PS2, N64, and GameCube will all have letterboxing as well. It'll be worse if you're running a game that's widescreen, although if you're running games that are wide 4x3, it really won't be too bad. I don't think that this is the device that you want to get if you're playing widescreen games. I think you're much better off getting something else that has a wider aspect ratio. This really feels great for 4x3 and more squarish stuff as well. And it feels great for arcade shooters. Here, let me show you some arcade shooters right now. The screen can get very bright, but it also has the possibility to get really dim. Here, let me show you the brightest setting. You swipe down from the top, and then you swipe down just a little bit more, and it brings up this slider, which you can then use the touch screen in order to change the brightness. So I'm in very, very bright studio lights right now. Here, let me get rid of that. I'm in very bright studio lights right now, and it looks a little blown out for my camera, but to me, this looks unbelievably good. Now, let me lower the brightness all the way down to the lowest setting. And you can see that you can just barely see what's on the screen. In fact, if I turn off my studio lights, you can just barely see that screen right there, which is pretty decent. I think it gets so dim that the lowest setting is a little bit too low. So I'm going to bring it up just a little bit, and that looks really good in this dark room. Oop, let me bring Daigisho back up again. That's what it looks like right there. But speaking of the screen, my unit has some significant light bleed in multiple spots. Here, I'm going to load up a black screen. So I'm going to go into my files, and I have a screenshot that's just a black screen. I'm going to open that up on here. And I'm going to crank the brightness all the way up on here. And now, if you look, you can see significant light bleed right here, as well as right over here. And in person, I can see another bright spot right there and another really bright spot down here. Now, I've spoken to some other content creators about this, and they've all had this same issue with some or all of the units that they have access to. I've been assured that this is because it's a pre-release unit, and I've been told that I'll be getting a retail unit soon. Once that comes in, I'll update the description down below that like button to let you know if the retail unit has the same issue as the sample unit. All right. Hardware aside, let's take a look at some gameplay. So there you have it. I feel like the RG Cube is a very interesting emulation device. There are absolutely some changes that I personally would make to this device, but overall, I'm enjoying it way more than I thought I was. And speaking of enjoying, if you enjoyed this video, then you're probably going to enjoy this one right here. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill, and I hope you stay rad.